right, we are back for another episode of Reacting to Crash Videos, and before we dive into this one, I have to give a disclaimer for YouTube itself and probably the human reviewer that's going to be looking at this video. The past few episodes have gotten demonetized or restricted due to, I think, the harmful or dangerous activities category. But in reality, when you look into YouTube's terms and conditions for this sort of thing, as long as this material is presented in an educational manner, which that's the whole purpose of these videos, they should be monetized. So human reviewer, if you are watching this episode right now, we're looking at these crash videos specifically for educational purposes. With that, just in case YouTube demonetizes this anyway, if you missed the last episode, we launched these new Risky socks, which are pretty sweet, available first link in the description. And we got beanies, got the sweet mustard color and a nice maroon with the cool Risky logo with a spark plug on them. Get those first link in the description. And if you're wondering what is playing behind me, this is a new episode on my second channel, Tucker Got Uncut. It's an uncut flight if you like that sort of thing. No narration, just doing stupid stuff like flying under power lines. Anyways, let's get into the episode. We have 4 crashes to look at today. As always, I stack them from the easiest to the worst. So crash number 1 comes from a man named Sean Hayden. He actually sent me this video clip with a really good description of what happened. Let's look at it and then talk about it. So in Sean's description, he tells me that every year for the past 3 years, I believe, he's been dressing up as the Grinch and flying around on his paramotor, and the local community has kind of caught on and turned it into a thing. He said even the local Buffalo Wild Wings and Chick-fil-A have reached out. This year, he kind of grew a crowd. This was around the holidays, so everyone's out to watch the Grinch fly around. It's a good old time, but Sean had a slight miscalculation. He'd been flying for a little while and he knew that he was getting low on fuel, and he put himself in a kind of peculiar situation where he was boxed in with some power lines. And at the worst possible moment, he ran out of gas. He describes that he had the option to bail to the right, but it would have put a crowd of people in harm's way. Being the smart man that he is, he decided to sacrifice himself and tried to clear the power lines, but didn't make it. He flew right into him, got hung up. He said the electricity actually went through himself and the cage. It warped some of the titanium. He had bruising in his legs. He got stuck in the power lines for about an hour until the fire department could get him down. He was not injured at all. I think the gear is still fine. So overall, a really good outcome for crashing into power lines. The second video comes from Instagram, and I found this video very interesting because to an untrained eye, you would probably see this and think paragliders are death traps. But to someone who knows what they're talking about, there's a very specific reason for this incident. Let's look at the clip.
Yay! Oh my god, what the hell? Holy shit.
Let me go get it.
Oh my god.
So to summarize what happened here, it is a lack of outside brake. What I mean by that is when you're flying a paraglider or paramotor in a shallow maneuver, it's pretty simple. You pull left, you go left, you pull right, you go right. It's kind of a robotic linear motion, but that only works to a certain degree of bank angle. When you start getting into bigger bank angles and especially building energy like we saw this pilot do, you start to require opposite brake, and it's counterintuitive, but there's a reason for it. In this situation, we see the pilot dive one way, dive the other, and he builds that energy and momentum into a really big turn. And if you look carefully, he's putting in input with one side, but his opposite hand is braced on the riser, and his opposite hand is not giving any brake input. What we see is the exact result of lack of opposite brake. Eventually, when you get to a point of turning to a certain degree, without opposite brake, the outside will actually collapse, and that's an angle of attack issue. We have to add that opposite brake to kind of increase the angle of attack of the wing to keep the air from hitting the top surface and collapsing the glider. That's something that you kind of learn intuitively as you start to progress into wingovers, but this pilot obviously either wasn't aware or hasn't gotten to that point and was flying past his skill set. On to video number 3. This one comes from my man Trevor. Shout out Trevor. His channel is linked in the description. This happened, I think, last summer, and he just put a really good video breaking down everything that happened, but I'll give my quick summary. First, let's look at the clip.
So we're flying in this wheat field, following some of my buddies, Scott and Mike. We're having a great time flying around in just a beautiful area. Montana is just incredible. And I dove away from Scott after following him down into the field, and I hooked my wingtip on the wheat. Once it hooked, it didn't let go. It pulled me into the ground where I hit and tumbled maybe 3-4 times before coming to a stop. After I came to a stop, I got up and shook it off, thought that I was totally okay, thought that everything was going to be fine. Noticed my ankles were maybe a little sore, but I didn't want to have the ego hit of not being able to walk myself out. So I got up and I wrapped up my wing and I put the motor on, and I trekked about 100 feet before I realized that my ankles aren't working super well. So I took the motor off. I trekked another 100 feet without the motor on before I sat down and ultimately didn't take another step for several months.
So obviously Trevor's wingtip grabbed the ground in a wingtip touch maneuver, and he crashed, shattered his heel, and messed up his ankles. Like I said, Trevor dives deep into this and all the reasons, but to summarize it, he was on a long trip, which led to a lack of sleep and fatigue. He had done a lot of flying, so he was feeling very current and very ready to push the envelope. A little bit of ego got sprinkled in there. He talks about how he had been practicing wingtip drags for a long time, got them dialed in, and was feeling very confident with the maneuver. He basically admits that wingtip drags are something that he said he would never do and stopped doing for a long time, and then started doing them and got really comfortable, and then this one bit him. In a wingtip drag, the final element also is you always, if you choose to do them, it's obviously a risky maneuver, but if you choose to do them, you always want to do them on a smooth surface like freshly mowed grass, water, or flat desert terrain with nothing grabby. A lot of people may think that corn or soybeans or wheat will give you a bit of buffer room for your wingtip to touch, but it actually is the opposite. Plants like this will grab your wingtip and pull the wing in, just as you saw here. So moral of the story, wingtip drags are dangerous, they're cool, but they don't really have a great risk to reward ratio. And if you're ever gonna do them, never do them on wheat or tall plants. This last and final video comes from Scott Presby. Let's look at the clip and then we'll talk about it. So essentially in this situation, Scott decides to do a full stall on a Wasabi, which is a B-rated glider. In Scott's breakdown, he acknowledges a lot of factors that went into this situation, one of which was doing it on an improper glider in the improper environment. Full stalls are not really something to mess around with, and you can see why. When they go wrong, they can go horribly wrong. In Scott's situation, the Wasabi is a little bit of a spicier glider to be doing this on, especially if you're loaded heavily versus loaded light. Things are going to respond faster and go south faster. He also said he shortened the brake lines, which changed the stall position. The one thing he did have going for him was altitude. He started at something like 3,400 feet. But as you see this full stall go south, the glider kind of horseshoes, gets a little asymmetric, and as it surges, he ends up in line twist. And that line twist quickly turns into one of the worst possible scenarios, which is a spinning line twist. The glider's flat on the horizon, which means you're building up G-forces, which makes it harder to even move your body. Line twist kind of takes away your control because now your control lines are all in this twisted mess. And worse yet, this is pretty much the worst possible scenario to try to throw your reserve, because as you can see, when he throws his reserve, the spinning maneuver just wraps up the reserve in the rotation. Now he's face first plummeting, twisted, diving, and his reserve is out and not doing anything. He struggles with it and tries everything he can, and finally, at kind of the last moment, gets a big break. The reserve makes its way through the lines of the glider and inflates and sets him down nicely. Moral of the story in this one, full stalls are dangerous. It is something that acro pilots take on a regular basis, but there's a really right progression to do it. Over water, in an SIV course, with the right glider, with multiple reserves and people in the water to help you. Doing it over hard ground with one reserve on a paramotor adds a lot more to the risk formula. Full stalls are personally not something I engage in because I'm not at a point where I want to commit to the practice it takes to do them properly. This was a really good demonstration of how quickly they can go wrong and how bad a spinning line twist situation really is. It's hard to get your reserve out, and even if you get it out, there's a high likelihood it's not going to work. Thank you to all 4 of these pilots for sharing your video clips. They will be linked in the description. Like I mentioned in the beginning, if you want to support the channel, if this video gets demonetized, pick up some risky socks, pick up some risky beanies, or a sweet shirt like this one on the web store. Also, if you want an ozone glider, reserve, harness, or eProps propeller, hit me up info@tuckergott.com or visit the web store. I can give you recommendations on any type of gear or glider, specifically ozone, that you want to get involved with. Appreciate your guys' support. Till the next one, have fun, fly safe, peace.